Yeah, the kid with a camera in his face for his entire career is currently being overlooked somehow. Despite being one of the most entertaining players in the entire NBA, an overlooked aspect of LaMelo's game has been his productivity and ability to improve others, and I don't mean that lightly actually. Don't forget he's playing with the Charlotte Hornets, by the way. This is a list of some of the best players that LaMelo has played with during his 3 seasons as a Charlotte Hornet. I was genuinely considering putting Brandon Miller on this list, even though he hasn't played a minute of NBA basketball yet. Just tells you how bad it's been in Charlotte. I'm not going to disrespect every single one of these players, but Terry Rozier as your second best player on your team isn't going to actually get you very far. Now, I don't think Terry Rozier is a bad player to have on your team. He can still be on a high, contending Eastern Conference team, but not as your first option or your second option. And with LaMelo getting better year after year after year, you've got to wonder, why haven't they, tried to move off Terry Rozier and maybe move him on to a contender or use some of their assets? I don't think Charlotte has actually made a move that's affected the course of their franchise. Every single one of their moves have been lateral. But I will say, out of everybody that LaMelo has played with in his 3 years, he's had a great vet in Terry Rozier. Yeah, but the drop off very far. It's a pretty steep drop, I will say. Other than playing with Terry Rozier, LaMelo has actually had close to no help. He's only gotten people to play better, but there's always a ceiling in terms of how good someone can be, depending on, of course, their potential and their skill set and their, determination and whatnot. Miles Bridges, who has gotten considerably better since LaMelo has gotten there, but has, of course, had a lot of off-court problems. Or a player like Gordon Hayward, who, if I'm being totally honest with you, not only has been checked out for a while now, but literally cannot play more than 50 games a season. The last time he played 50 games was in 2019. But then he played 52 games in that season. But when you have a lineup of LaMelo, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, Miles Bridges, and Mason Plumlee, I don't really think you can put too much pressure on the dude when he, actually isn't winning games but is performing pretty well. Or when they had to have a lineup of LaMelo, Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre, Gordon Hayward at the 4, and PJ Washington at the 5. PJ Washington at the 5. I would just like to reiterate that PJ Washington is 6'7", by the way. PJ Washington at the 5. And when you have players like Bryce, these are names that I've never heard before, by the way. You got Svi Mykhailiuk, who, he played for the Raptors one time, I guess. JT Thor, who's another draft pick. They don't draft well either. They draft horrendously. Do you remember who James Bouknight is? I don't. Let's just hope that Brandon Miller is going to turn out okay because, they missed out on Scoot Henderson, who was pretty good. Honestly, if I was a Charlotte fan and I had to watch another player that we didn't draft become a superstar, I think I'd start weighing my options and, Alright, let's move on to this very, very annoying part, which is comparing players. Now, LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards, for some odd reason, have been constantly compared. For no reason, actually. They play in different conferences. They're both very good at basketball, but comparing them is extremely hard. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, I would just like to, again, reiterate, Anthony Edwards is an exceptional player, okay? And yes, I know I am about to say something very negative, but because I said something positive, I'm allowed to say whatever I want now. I don't think he's as good as LaMelo Ball, and I kind of think it's not close. Okay, I think not close is kind of an overreaction though. I think his situation and how many wins he's gotten with the players he's been playing with kind of, actually represent that as well. Okay. Anthony Edwards is playing with 4 All-Stars. Did you see what I just did there? I could actually kind of use that as, a narrative for me to state my point. But in all honesty, it's not completely wrong. Anthony Edwards has played with 4 All-Stars, which is different to playing with Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward and Miles Bridges. Now, I understand if, I'm using that as a case, well, Gordon Hayward was an All-Star in 2017. But yeah, you didn't know that, did you? Because I didn't. I just Googled it, actually. I had some weird hunch. I know the guy was good before his injury, but I don't know. I wasn't sure. Anyways, that's besides the point. Naz Reid would still start for Charlotte if he played for Charlotte. And I think that's, in terms of putting it in perspective, just how bad Charlotte is. And if you want some, just some analytical data, if you actually take the wins and the losses over the last 3 years and put them together, it's crazy how close they are. Despite Minnesota being the better team by a large margin in terms of talent, which nobody brings up when they talk about LaMelo and Anthony Edwards. And if you think I'm, trying to add up all the, years to actually come out to an outcome like, oh, maybe Minnesota had more years where they had a winning season. No, Minnesota did have 2 winning seasons, which is more than Charlotte, but Charlotte had 1, and LaMelo was injured for about 80% of the games for last season. So I mean, take that as you will. I know this is like pretty general because, well, Minnesota has been very, very injured, but they've always been injury prone. The players, they're stars, they've always been injury prone. It just makes it considerably more complicated if you want to add that, into the argument. But yeah, I just wanted to come out here and kind of just show that LaMelo isn't really working with much, and comparing him to other players is very difficult because he's making the best, in my opinion, out of a pretty shitty situation, and he just re-signed for them, so which was, I think, maybe the only good move that franchise has made in a long time. But yeah, we'll see what happens, right? Hopefully Brandon Miller is good because I do want to see LaMelo, actually contend. I don't want a season to end before the playoffs start every year. So yeah.